You know what? I think I figured it out. I think I've cracked the secrets to time travel. Now to go get Joe. All right, Joe, thank you for your willingness to participate in this new program. Hopefully you'll be the very first man to ever time travel. Take a seat.
I'm excited. It should be pretty simple. Just go back and return in an instant.
Now hold your horses. While it may seem simple, time travel is actually extremely complex, and we must make sure that we both understand the basics before you go anywhere.
What basics? It seems self-explanatory. Time is something we all experience 24/7. So I feel like I have a good grasp on how time functions. I feel like everyone should know how time works to some extent.
Well, you know, it may seem like that, Joe, but time is one of those subjects that neither philosophers nor scientists, like myself, truly understand. And you're the first one to time travel, so it's important that we make sure that we don't, mess things up. Imagine all the things that could go wrong. There are multiple different paradoxes that could happen.
What do you mean by paradoxes? Are those actually a thing?
Oh, Joe, you ignorant buffoon. Paradoxes in time travel are a serious discussion in the world of physics and philosophy. You must learn that time travel and the flow of time are so uncertain. Many scholars have differing opinions on how time even flows.
Like who? Isn't time just like a straight line?
I knew you were going to ask that, so I did a bit of research on the subject. So I was doing some readings and I found this very interesting survey article titled The Direction of Time by Stephen F. Savitt in the Oxford Journal. And using this research article as a reference, I hope to show you that even the brightest minds, such as myself, don't really agree on how time works. This along with paradoxes, which we'll discuss later. And these help us see that we must decide how we view time before we start time traveling. Time is not really as objective as you may think. So many people think that the present continually moves with time, but how exactly would you quantify the present? There's a good quote from Richard Taylor which sums up the challenge in quantifying what the present is. I believe it goes something like, of course there's a temptation to say that the present moves in some sense, since the expression the present never designates the same time twice over. A moment no sooner emerges from the future and becomes present than it lapses forever into an ever-receding past. But this kind of statement gravely asserts says only the word now never. The direction of time, i.e. at no time, designates more than one time, the time of its utterance, to which we can add that the word here, likewise nowhere, i.e. at no place, designates more than one place, the place of its utterance.
I don't really get this. I'm really confused.
All right, think about it this way, all right? If we are in the present now, does that mean the past doesn't exist? The past itself has happened, but what do you make of it now? Is the future always here, or is it made? Let's say you have a friend in Australia, right? And you text them to call you now. Then the moment that they're receiving the text is no longer the same now that you were referring to. When you receive the text, is that in the present or in the past? It's your past, but their present. This allows you to consider that we don't exactly know how to quantify time, and the flow of time itself comes as our first paradox, because a paradox is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a statement or a proposition which on the face of it seems self-contradictory, absurd, or at variance with common sense, though on investigation or when explained it may prove to be well-founded. It seems absurd to say that there are multiple presents or multiple nows, but we've just discussed that as a possibility. Solving this paradox of the flow of time is something that many have tried to do. And in Savitt's article, he brings up many different scientists who've tried to quantify the flow of time, such as Hans Reichenbach, who claims that time moves as entropy increases. There's another statement from Paul Horwich which states that the future and the past are intrinsically the same thing. And another scientist, Hugh Price, claims that there is no objective flow of time. And all these arguments really go to show us how important it is to consider how we view time before we go back into the past. You know what? further prove my point that time is a concept that scientists don't really agree on, I'm gonna call my old friend. And I know we don't always see eye to eye on things, so I think she could help you further understand this.
Okay, even if I understand the direction of time, is time travel even possible?
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. And so, I was recently reading an article published by Stanford about time travel and Einstein's general theory of relativity, like baby physics stuff. And so, if you can imagine, this is space-time, right? So, people tend to think of space in 3-dimension. Well, in reality, it's 4-dimension. So, let's say this is your time axis. This is your space axis, right? You can actually create closed time loops throughout space-time. And there's a variety of different methods that you can use to do this. They're pretty complex and use high-end math, but they don't violate Einstein's general theory of relativity. You can create these time loops without going faster than the speed of light. So for example, one of these is the use of wormholes. So imagine this is your space-time, right? Just like a flat plane. You can actually curve the plane around and then create a hole between 2 points in the plane. And that's the essential elements of a wormhole. And so this is one of the many ways that you can do time travel without violating Einstein's general theory of relativity.
That seems really complicated. Is that at all like Back to the Future? What if I see my family when they were my age? That would be super cool and maybe even be friends with them.
No. You can't do that. As awesome as that would be, meeting your parents and grandparents and their younger selves could be catastrophic. Since they are the reason you're alive today, changing their lives could potentially mean that your parents might never meet, and they would never have children that end up being you.
Whoa, I like being alive. But wait, there feels like there's something wrong about this.
You know what? You're absolutely right. That's the first thing you've been right about today. If you were to intervene with your parents' meeting, thus preventing them from having you, then you wouldn't be able to go back in time to prevent your parents from meeting. A common theme in pop culture is for the main character that is participating in the paradox to start fading away.
That seems crazy though. If time occurs, like in a circle like we just talked about, then wouldn't that mean that I went back in time and came back and everything was fine?
See, therein lies the paradox. Imagine this more simply. If you were to go back in time with a loaded gun, trying to kill your grandfather, would you be able to? Or what if you went back in time to try to kill yourself? If time is linear, then the logic behind killing the creation or the events that led up to your creation, that in and of itself, that is the grandfather paradox.
Hey Rick, how are you doing? And you must be our test subject, Joe. Nice to meet you.
How's it going, Jessica? Long time no see. I was just briefing Joe on the different paradoxes of time travel. Listen in and feel free to interject whenever you want.
Sure.
Now, young Joey McJoseph, of course, as we said before, time is completely subjective. And that's important to consider how you view time, since the dangers of time travel depend completely on what you believe to be true, what you believe to be the true flow of time. And so personally, I think considering the size and continuous growth of the universe, the multi-universe concept is a strong possibility, meaning that any time travel takes you to a parallel universe. And if this is true, it would prevent the dangers of the grandfather paradox from occurring, and also means that the bootstrap paradox doesn't exist.
Multiverse? Interesting theory, but I'm gonna have to disagree. Time is constrained to one timeline. Either that or the other timelines are not accessible to us. Consider what Novikov talks about in his paper, Cauchy problems in spacetimes with closed light curves, the Novikov self-consistency principle. If an event could cause a paradox, then there's virtually zero chance that the event would occur at all, which also prevents the grandfather paradox. And even more than that, if we successfully send you back, Joe, anything that you do in the past technically is already part of history. Because the future of our past involves you going back in time. Perhaps you even help bring about our ability to time travel because of your future knowledge being applied in the past. That's what we call bootstrap.
Wait, bootstrap? How does that even work?
See, that's where things get interesting. In this hypothetical situation, if you going back to the past with your knowledge of time travel is what allows us to come up with time travel in the present, which is what allows you to send you back to the past, where does time travel originate? We wouldn't be able to succeed in time travel without first completing a successful time travel trip.
What?
Have you ever seen Terminator?
Should I tell you about your father? Boy, that's a tough one. Will it affect your decision to send him here, knowing that he is your father? If you don't send Kyle, you can never be. God, a person could go crazy thinking about this. I suppose I will tell you. I owe him that. Maybe it'll help if you know that in the few hours that we had together, we loved a lifetime's worth.
Where does John come from? If he never sends Kyle back to the past, John would never be born. If John was never born, Kyle would never be able to go back to the past.
But how does the loop even start? If one thing causes the next thing, that caused the first thing. And without the next thing, the first thing would never have happened.
I mean, that only really applies if you believe in whatever garbage she's saying.
Alright, so let's just say I hypothetically, really bad, screw everything up in the past. What happens then?
Oh, it's already too late to think about that. What will happen has already happened, so there's no point worrying about it.
Wait, what do you mean what happened has already happened? That sentence doesn't make any sense. How can the future have already happened?
Have you ever read Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban?
I watched the movie.
Of course you did. Well, do you remember that scene when Harry sees his dad cast the Patronus and saves him and Sirius from the Dementors, and then goes back in time and realizes it was actually him who cast it? That's what I mean by the future has already happened. Think about it this way. All right, let's say this is the timeline, and this is you going back to the past. Anything you do is technically your future, since you personally haven't done it yet, but also it has already happened in this timeline. So you see, there's nothing to worry about, because you can't change what already happened.
Alright, I guess that makes sense.
So my theory is based on this idea called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, or MWI. All right, let's say this is your timeline, right? And here is breakfast, and you have a decision to eat a bagel or eggs. So instead of there only being one path where let's say you just eat eggs, the paths actually split. One where you eat eggs for breakfast and one where you eat cereal. And this is the basic premise of MWI, except instead of your breakfast, it's the randomness of particles. And so what I propose is that if there are just a bunch of different branches constantly streaming out, let's say this is you time traveling is simply jumping in between these branches instead of going down one single timeline. Does that make sense?
I think.
You know what? Don't worry if it doesn't. I can show you a good article from Stanford that can go more into depth about MWI.
Listen, you idiot. Even if MWI is true, which we don't, and time travel is jumping between worlds, predestination could still happen. Have you ever heard of Jorge Borges' The Garden of Forking Paths?
I think I remember reading it in college.
Well, then you had a fantastic English teacher. Anyway, in this story, Borges describes how paths can both diverge and converge, which means that it's entirely possible, even if you go down a different path and make different choices, you still end up with the same outcome, which means predestination exists, even in a multi-world theory of time travel.
So Joseph, after all you've heard, do you think you're ready to time travel?
I think that my perspective on life has changed. Time seems so basic in our lives, but I've learned that it really is anything but simple. We think we've all mastered how time works, but in reality, even scientists and philosophers don't understand how time works. Talking about all these paradoxes has forced me to choose how I view time. These paradoxes have helped me learn about how physics concepts apply to my life, and have helped me learn that views on time can be subjective.
You know what? That's a very astute conclusion you've come up with. The whole point of what we've been talking about is that paradoxes make us choose how we view time travel, because even though we brought up a lot of ideas, we, the scientists, have no idea which one is correct. So, with all that being said, let's make history. Are you ready to time travel?
No, not really.
Listen, Joe, you signed the form. I gotta submit a report. Put these on. You're gonna need them. Let's go. Gotta report to fill out. You'll be fine. So, what do you think's gonna happen to him?
I think worst case, worst scenario, he phases out of existence and we won't remember Joe.
Remember who?
I'm not sure actually.
All right, well, I gotta go crack time travel, so see you later.
See ya.